Nada cambia si tú no cambias. This is not just a phrase, it is a mirror held up to your life. If you look honestly, you will realize that every result you are living today is the consequence of choices you made yesterday. The world does not respond to wishes, excuses, or intentions, it responds to action. If you keep doing what you have always done, you will keep getting what you have always gotten. Personal transformation begins the moment you accept full responsibility for where you are and where you are going. That moment of ownership is the starting point of all meaningful success. One of the greatest illusions people live with is the belief that circumstances will somehow improve on their own. They wait for the economy to change, for other people to behave differently, for luck to finally knock on their door. But successful individuals understand a fundamental law of life: nothing improves until you improve. When you change your thinking, you change your decisions. When you change your decisions, you change your habits. And when you change your habits, you change your destiny. Progress is never accidental, it is always intentional. Consider this powerful truth: you are where you are because it is comfortable to stay there. Even dissatisfaction can become familiar. Growth, however, demands discomfort. It demands discipline when motivation fades. It demands clarity when confusion tempts you to quit. High achievers train themselves to act in alignment with their goals, not their emotions. They do what is hard now so that life can be easy later. Average people do what is easy now and wonder why life becomes hard later. Every breakthrough begins with a decision. A decision to wake up earlier, to learn a new skill, to leave behind excuses, to stop blaming the past, and to start investing in your future. The moment you decide to change, your standards rise. You no longer tolerate what drains your energy, wastes your time, or weakens your self-respect. You begin to ask better questions. What can I do today to move closer to my goals? How can I use this challenge to grow stronger? These questions shape a mind that is focused on solutions, not limitations. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Motivation comes and goes, but discipline stays. It is the quiet commitment to do what must be done, especially when no one is watching. Small actions repeated daily create extraordinary results over time. Success is not one giant leap, it is the accumulation of small, consistent improvements. Change your daily routine, and you will change your life. Remember this: you do not need more time, more resources, or more permission. You need a higher standard for yourself. When you raise your standards, your behavior rises to meet them. When you commit to excellence, your confidence grows. And as your confidence grows, so does your capacity to achieve more than you ever thought possible. So let this be the moment you stop waiting and start becoming. Stop hoping for change and start creating it. Decide today to think differently, act differently, and live differently. Because the truth is simple and unshakable: nada cambia si tú no cambias. But when you do change, everything changes with you. Personal responsibility is the moment when life stops happening to you and starts responding to you. It is the instant you realize that every result you are experiencing today, financially, emotionally, physically, and professionally, is connected to choices you made yesterday, whether consciously or unconsciously. This realization can feel uncomfortable, even confronting, but it is also the most empowering truth you will ever accept. The moment you stop blaming circumstances, other people, the economy, your past, or your lack of opportunities, you reclaim your power. Responsibility is not about guilt or self-criticism, it is about control. If you are the cause, then you can also be the solution. That single shift in thinking separates those who remain stuck from those who move forward with clarity and confidence. Most people unknowingly give away their power by adopting the role of a victim. They say things like, "I would succeed if conditions were better," or "I'll change when things calm down." But conditions rarely become perfect, and waiting is simply another form of avoidance. High performers understand that responsibility means acting despite imperfect conditions. They do not ask who is at fault, they ask, "What can I do now?" That question is a hook that pulls you out of stagnation and into progress. It forces your mind to search for solutions instead of excuses, and where your focus goes, your energy follows. Taking responsibility also requires brutal honesty with yourself. It means admitting that comfort has a cost, and that staying the same is often easier than changing. Many people confuse familiarity with safety, even when that familiarity is holding them back. Responsibility challenges you to stop negotiating with your potential. It asks you to look at your habits, your routines, and your daily decisions and recognize that they are shaping your future whether you like it or not. The way you start your mornings, the information you consume, the people you allow influence you, and the standards you accept all compound over time. Nothing here is accidental. One of the most powerful hooks of personal responsibility is understanding that no one is coming to rescue you. This is not a harsh truth. It is a liberating one. When you stop waiting for permission, motivation, or validation, you move faster. You stop outsourcing your confidence and start building it through action. Each responsible decision strengthens your self-respect, and self-respect fuels consistency. Consistency, not intensity, is what changes lives. Small choices made daily under your control quietly reshape your identity. Responsibility also reframes failure. Instead of seeing mistakes as proof that you are incapable, you begin to see them as feedback. You ask better questions. What did this teach me? What can I adjust? What will I do differently next time? This mindset turns setbacks into stepping stones. The most successful individuals are not those who avoid failure, but those who take responsibility for learning from it. They understand that growth demands experimentation, and experimentation guarantees
imperfection.
When you fully embrace personal responsibility, your language changes. You stop saying I can't and start saying I haven't yet. You stop saying they made me and start saying I chose. This shift is subtle but transformative. Your words reinforce your identity, and your identity determines your behavior. Responsibility builds internal authority, the kind that does not depend on external approval. It creates emotional stability because you are no longer at the mercy of circumstances beyond your control. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your life is in your hands. It does not mean you control everything, but it means you control your response to everything. And your response determines your results. When you accept this fully, procrastination loses its grip, excuses lose their credibility, and action becomes non-negotiable. Personal responsibility is not a burden, it is the doorway to freedom, growth, and lasting success. Change always begins in the invisible world before it ever shows up in the visible one. Long before circumstances shift, results improve, or success becomes noticeable, something far more important must happen internally. Your thoughts, beliefs, and self-image quietly shape every decision you make. What you think about consistently becomes what you act on, and what you act on repeatedly becomes your reality. Many people try to change their lives by adjusting external factors, new environments, new opportunities, new relationships, without first changing the internal lens through which they see themselves. When that inner lens remains the same, the outer world eventually returns to its old patterns. The mind is the control center of performance. Every action you take is preceded by a thought, and every habit is fueled by belief. If you believe you are limited, you will unconsciously act in limited ways.
If growth is possible, your behavior begins to align with that belief. This is why two people can face the same situation and produce completely different outcomes.
The difference is not intelligence or luck, it is interpretation. What you tell yourself about a challenge determines whether it becomes a wall or a doorway. One of the strongest hooks in personal development is realizing that you are always acting in alignment with your self-image. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your identity. If internally you see yourself as inconsistent, undeserving, or incapable, no external opportunity will last. You may achieve temporary success, but without internal alignment, it will feel uncomfortable, and you will subconsciously sabotage it. Lasting change requires upgrading the way you see yourself before you attempt to upgrade your results. Internal change demands awareness. It requires you to observe your habitual thinking without judgment and question whether those thoughts are serving or sabotaging you. Many beliefs you carry today were formed years ago, often unconsciously, through past experiences, failures, or the opinions of others. Just because a belief feels familiar does not mean it is true. Growth begins when you challenge old narratives and replace them with intentional, empowering ones. The moment you do this, your behavior starts to shift naturally without force. Emotional mastery is another internal foundation of external success. Life will always present pressure, uncertainty, and setbacks. Those who thrive are not those who avoid stress, but those who manage their emotional responses effectively. When you learn to pause instead of react, to respond instead of blame, you create stability in chaos. This inner control allows you to stay focused on long-term goals instead of short-term relief. Emotional discipline is a silent advantage that compounds over time. Internal change also reshapes your standards. What you tolerate internally determines what you accept externally. When your self-respect rises, your choices improve. You begin to protect your time, energy, and attention because you recognize their value. You no longer need constant motivation because your internal standards guide your actions. Discipline becomes an expression of identity rather than an act of willpower. This is where consistency is born. Another powerful realization is that clarity precedes momentum. When your inner world is aligned, your values, intentions, and priorities are clear, decisions become easier. Confusion fades, hesitation decreases, and action accelerates. Many people feel stuck not because they lack ability, but because their internal world is cluttered with doubt and contradiction. Simplifying your inner dialogue creates space for decisive action. As internal change deepens, the external world begins to respond differently. Opportunities appear because you are prepared to see them. Relationships improve because your communication improves. Results follow because your actions are now congruent with who you are becoming. What looks like sudden success from the outside is often the delayed reflection of internal work done quietly over time. Discipline is the quiet force that determines the direction of a life long after motivation fades. Motivation is emotional, temporary, and unpredictable. It rises when conditions feel right and disappears when effort becomes uncomfortable. Discipline, on the other hand, is deliberate. It is the decision to act according to your goals rather than your moods. The most successful people do not rely on feeling inspired. They rely on systems, routines, and commitments that keep them moving forward, regardless of how they feel on a given day. This is a critical distinction because feelings change daily, but disciplined behavior compounds consistently. One of the greatest hooks in personal achievement is understanding that discipline is a form of self-respect. Every time you follow through on a promise to yourself, you strengthen trust in your own word. Every time you quit because it feels difficult, that trust weakens. Over time, this internal trust becomes confidence. Confidence is not built through positive thinking alone, it is built through evidence, and discipline creates that evidence. You stop doubting yourself not because life becomes easier, but because you have proven to yourself that you can do what is necessary even when it is hard. Discipline removes the need for constant decision-making. When standards are clear, actions become automatic. You no longer negotiate with yourself every morning about whether to work, train, study, or improve. The decision has already been made. This eliminates mental fatigue and preserves energy for what truly matters. High performers design their lives to reduce reliance on willpower, knowing that willpower is limited. Instead, they structure habits that operate even on low-energy days. That structure becomes freedom. Another powerful realization is that discipline is not punishment, it is direction. It is the alignment between where you are and where you want to be. Many people associate discipline with restriction, but in reality, discipline expands options. The disciplined person gains more control over time, health, finances, and opportunities. The undisciplined person trades short-term comfort for long-term limitation. What feels restrictive today often becomes the very thing that creates freedom tomorrow. Discipline also reframes discomfort. Instead of seeing discomfort as a signal to stop, disciplined individuals see it as confirmation that growth is happening. Progress rarely feels pleasant in the moment. Muscles grow through resistance, skills develop through repetition, and character is built through challenge. When you expect discomfort, it loses its power to derail you. You stop asking, how do I avoid this, and start asking, how do I use this? That shift separates those who plateau from those who continue to rise. Consistency is where discipline shows its true strength. Small actions repeated daily produce results that dramatic bursts of motivation never can. Reading 10 pages a day, exercising 20 minutes daily, improving one skill at a time, these actions may seem insignificant in isolation, but over months and years, they transform identity and outcomes. Discipline understands the math of success. Small gains compounded over time create extraordinary change. Motivation seeks intensity. Discipline masters duration. Discipline also creates emotional stability. When your actions are not dependent on your emotions, your progress is no longer vulnerable to stress, fear, or self-doubt. You learn to act first and let motivation catch up later. Often, action creates motivation, not the other way around. Waiting to feel ready keeps people stuck. Acting while uncertain moves them forward. Discipline breaks the cycle of hesitation. As discipline strengthens, self-leadership emerges. You no longer need external pressure, reminders, or accountability to perform at a high level. You become internally driven, guided by standards rather than circumstances. This internal authority is rare, and it is powerful. It allows you to move steadily toward long-term success while others fluctuate between excitement and burnout. Discipline does not shout, it works quietly, relentlessly, and over time, it changes everything. Raising your personal standards is one of the most powerful yet underestimated decisions you will ever make. Life rarely rises deep.
Oh, the level of your hopes or intentions, it almost always falls to the level of what you are willing to tolerate.
The standards you set for your behavior, your thinking, your relationships, and your performance quietly shape your future every single day. When standards are low, potential leaks away unnoticed. When standards rise, life begins to reorganize itself around that decision. This shift does not require permission, luck, or perfect timing. It begins the moment you decide that average is no longer acceptable. One of the most compelling hooks in personal growth is realizing that standards operate whether you define them consciously or not. If you do not set them intentionally, they will be set by habit, comfort, and convenience. Many people live far below their capabilities not because they lack talent, but because they have normalized behaviors that undermine excellence. Tolerating lateness, inconsistency, negative self-talk, or poor boundaries sends a message to the subconscious about what is acceptable. Over time, that message becomes identity. Raising standards interrupts this pattern and demands a higher level of self-leadership. Higher standards change behavior before they change results. When you decide that certain actions are no longer an option, discipline becomes simpler. You stop negotiating with yourself because the decision has already been made. This is why elite performers appear decisive and consistent. They do not rely on motivation, they rely on non-negotiable standards. They do not ask how they feel, they act according to who they have decided to be. That internal clarity eliminates hesitation and accelerates progress. Raising standards also reshapes your environment. As your expectations of yourself increase, your tolerance for energy-draining situations decreases. You become more selective with your time, more intentional with your commitments, and more protective of your focus. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. When your standards rise, distractions lose their appeal, and opportunities that match your values become easier to recognize. Your environment begins to support your growth instead of resisting it. Another powerful realization is that standards are deeply connected to self-worth. You treat yourself according to what you believe you deserve. When self-respect grows, so do your standards. You no longer accept relationships that diminish you, habits that weaken you, or excuses that keep you small. This internal shift often feels uncomfortable at first because it requires letting go of familiarity. But growth always requires release. You cannot elevate your future while clinging to behaviors that belong to your past. Raising standards does not mean demanding perfection, it means demanding progress. It means choosing excellence over excuses and responsibility over convenience. You begin to measure yourself not against other people but against your own potential. This creates intrinsic motivation, the most sustainable kind. You are no longer driven by approval or comparison, but by a personal commitment to becoming better than you were yesterday. As standards rise, confidence follows. Confidence is the natural result of living in alignment with your values. When your actions match your intentions, inner conflict disappears. You trust yourself more because your behavior is predictable and consistent. This trust fuels courage, and courage opens doors that once felt unreachable. What once seemed difficult becomes normal, and what once seemed impossible becomes achievable. Raising personal standards is not a single decision, it is a daily practice. Each choice reinforces the identity you are building. Over time, these choices compound into a future that reflects discipline, clarity, and purpose. Your results will always be the echo of your standards, and when those standards rise, your future has no choice but to rise with them.